Good afternoon, everyone. Good. Very blessed to be here talking about this book. The feeling that I would like to share with you is that moment that it's that regret, but then we go back to say, let's continue to work. Much like when we go to the gym and we start a new class or yoga class, whatever it is, and then in the middle of the class, you're like, what have I got myself into, right? Talking about plenitude and trying to understand what Joanna de Angelis is bringing to us. But then in the middle of that despair, of that difficult moment, we go back and and look at that beautiful pictures that we have of Joanna de Angelis and what she's saying. It's like, this will help us. This will help me, consequently others as well. And we keep going, right? So it's a true blessing to have this book in our hands, these teachings in our hands, and to work with it, and to be able to share with it. It's a book, as we were seeing here, psychographed through the medium Divaldo Franco, by the spirit Joanna de Angelis. This version that we have here, that I have in my hand, a little bit used, but we have some here as well, is from Leal Publisher. It was actually published in 2016, this version that we have. But the book was actually psychographed in 1996, if I'm not mistaken. I always get the dates confused. 91. So it has been with us for quite some time. And we saw already a couple of the chapters, the opening chapter, suffering, and the introductory chapter, in chapter 1, so bringing the enlightenment that Joanna de Angelis in this book brings some references from the Buddhist beliefs, along with the Christian beliefs, and obviously the enlightenment of Spiritism together. And it's amazing how she puts the three together, right? I am not, by far, an individual who understands and can give you any information about the Buddhist belief. All that it will be bringing, all that we will be discussing is exactly what Joanna de Angelis says. I am in the quest of doing so, because if she can do it, guess what? We can all do, right? We can all merge these teachings together and learn a little bit about ourselves. But it's something that we're going to discuss, and as we see it, I'll point out to you what we can go after and what we can learn from it. But it's beautiful the way she takes these teachings and brings to us. So as we mentioned, we already worked on the introductory chapter, and then chapter 1 talking about suffering. It's funny because, as we always like to say, the title of the book is Plenitude. Fullness, right? To be plentiful. And then when we look at the name of the chapters, all the chapters, 14 chapters, what do we see? Do we see any reference of plenitude? We see what? Suffering, 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 and suffering. This is the only way that we're going to get to plenitude. We have to understand what we're going through right now, individually and collectively, to get to plenitude. We have to understand that we are here temporarily, and our happiness is also temporarily, and it depends on the level where we are, right? So don't be alarmed by the name of the chapters, because she also brings consolation even though she's talking about suffering. For example, tonight we will be talking about an analysis of suffering and the origins of suffering. But we will see that there is consolation. And as we go through our analysis, our own conclusions, we'll see, this is what it means. This is how I will be a better person. This is how I will feel plentiful as well. Because I will stop doing the things that I was doing wrong. Using the same team, right? And you don't win. You got to change the team. You got to change your game. So before we go into the actual chapter, one thing that I remembered is that last night, for those who are with us in our WhatsApp group, and I'm trying to pull it up here. I know this is not something that we'll be working. Again, what makes you suffer and how does sufferings manifest in your life? Question number 2, which is more directed to chapter number 3, the origins of suffering, I asked, what are the origins of your suffering? What are the origins of your suffering? I'll open up a couple minutes if anybody would like to discuss. If anybody doesn't want to say what it is, it's okay. But how did you feel about it? And I don't know where my microphone is. Huh? Oh, there it is. Sorry. Does anybody want to say anything? Does anybody took the time to think about it? I'll say it again. Maybe you would like to say it now. Think about it now. What makes you suffer and how does sufferings manifest in your life? And the second question, what are the origins of your sufferings? And then I'll go to you, Kirsten.
Well, it's my understanding from the Buddhist philosophy is that all suffering comes from desire. So if you have a desire, and of course it was thwarted, you suffer.
Okay.
So I believe their theory is that you should try to quench your desires, and then you have less suffering.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're getting to already chapter number 2. Awesome. Number 3, actually. Kirsten.
I think it's along the lines of what Donald was just saying. I think it's, for me, it's having an idea of a certain thing and then not getting that or not being able to reach that and then suffering because of it. But again, it goes back to similar teaching in Buddhism where you desire a certain thing and you don't get it, so then you suffer. So it's sort of the same thing.
Thank you, Kirsten.
A source of suffering for me is having been too dependent on the goodwill of others. So, I mean, this has been a lifelong self-realization process and having a difficulty handling criticism from other people. So I finally figured out this much, that when a negative feedback comes to me, it's actually triggering what I believe about myself. So the person's just a catalyst for me to root out that I am a worthy person.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. And lastly, Yasko.
I don't know if it's in the topic, but what is the source of my suffering? It's always when I see I don't have control of it. Like more or less what Paula said, that depended on others, like somebody injured or leave a dog, an animal, or a helpless creature without, in the wood, for instance. I suffer because I say, I'm not there, but I hope someone goes there and rescue. Mm-hmm. So all those worries of, helpless creature that is helpless because other people left them helpless, I think is source of my suffering.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Because this is exactly what the intention of this talk and this exchange of information, or bringing some of the aspects that Joanna de Angelis is bringing to us, is here for us to do, which is to make us think, really dive within ourselves. On the message as well that I sent, I asked you guys, don't beat yourself up. This is only a process for us to understand ourselves. We're in a process of getting better on how we do these analysis, because sometimes when we think, we get upset, or we go to the extremes, right? When we realize that we're doing something wrong and we want to change, there's always a subtle way. But most of the time, what do we like to do? Impose something really drastic in ourselves. And this is exactly what Buddha did. And Joanna de Angelis brings this to us. Let me just go back to the book to bring to you what Joanna de Angelis says. The Buddha taught that life's only purpose is the struggle for victory over suffering. We're here to work our sufferings. Striving to overcome it must be one's constant concern. After attempting to overcome suffering by means of the most austere asceticism and the strictest discipline, the young Gautama left the monastery with a few discouraged followers and began meditating, calmly achieving enlightenment. He established the theory of the middle way, one way or the other, to find peace. Neither cruel austerity nor the usual self-indulgence, but the balance of meditation. If anything tonight that we can learn is this. Let us bring balance in our lives. We talk about the wants, as he mentioned, right? We talk about frustration, delusion, as Kirsten brought to us, as Paula, as well as the necessary pains that we have to go through in our lives. As Yasko mentioned, an animal suffering. When we suffer in the physical body as well. This is all part of life. Now, how we see it and how we react to it is really the question here. So let us bring this to heart, the balance, and we'll dive into a little bit more. Actually, no. So then, Joanna de Angelis says, he then turned his attention to individuals' liberation and established the Four Noble Truths: suffering, its origins, the end of suffering, and the paths to liberation from suffering. As you can see here, is basically how she conducts the series of topics in this book as well. We talk about suffering. We're going to get to know a little bit more of it tonight on the analysis, the origins that we're going to talk about it as well, and then everything more or less is about ending suffering, right? And the pathways to liberation from suffering. This is going to be the next topics that we will be talking about it. So, the Four Noble Truths: suffering, its origin, the end of suffering, and the paths to liberation from suffering. Furthermore, she goes into and says, according to his way of thinking, suffering appears in three different forms. Suffering from suffering. It's kind of hard, right? Suffering from impermanence, and suffering resulting from conditionings. Let's see what they are, right? And we're going to work on each of them separately. So, is it possible to suffer from suffering? How? Anybody would like to shoot an example? Suffering from suffering.
Somebody else paying.
Someone else is paying? Kirsten.
Yeah, I mean, or when you're going through something and then you're frustrated that you're going through it, you suffer because of that. Like, you know, I can't think of an exact example, but if you have a disease and you're suffering from it, and then you suffer because you're suffering, it's like because of the stigma. Thank you, Daniel. Do you want to talk?
Ben, you want to go? You going to give it a try?
No, you should already said.
All right. So suffering from suffering. So a frustration, perhaps because you don't have a way to fix it, right? And then you make it worse. That is true. That is true. And we make it worse. We make it worse. Paula.
I'll just remember my last illness. That wasn't long ago. It was in January.
Okay.
And I really wanted to clear my mind
All
and
right.
get to neutral. But it's not so simple when you're not feeling well to not think about not feeling well. So it really was an effort to get to neutral so I could clear the deck,
Are you well now?
as well as I believe I can be.
Great.
But I may not be. I'm
That's
still
okay,
in a body.
but you feel well. And the reason I ask, guys, thank you, Paula, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but the reason I ask is because these teachings, we have to receive when everything is nice. Because when you go through it, the probability of you remembering these things when you go in the middle of the heat, it's not going to happen. And for you to sit down and say, okay, let me really read Joanna de Angelis about analysis of suffering. When your heart is this big, it's not going to happen. At least for myself, I don't think I can. It's hard sometimes to even stop and pray. Imagine to read Joanna de Angelis, right? So then, Joanna de Angelis starts by saying, in the vast arena of pathology, suffering presents itself under two aspects, physical and mental. In this case, suffering is like an illness that is both cause and effect. I always thought that either one thing is a cause or it's an effect. But Joanna de Angelis, she has a way to change your mind. She has a way to change your mind. And it is. The suffering in itself becomes the cause, and it becomes the effect of what you're doing. It's not the pain that is doing that, but you yourself with those feelings. But it's amazing that it does happen. And then she goes into the reminding all of us that, as I'm going to take the example that Yasko brought to us, the physical body, this physical body, did we ever believe that it's going to be the same for the rest of our lives? We're here in I would say a good age. We have some teenagers in the back and all. We have Raphael here. But look, guys, we know that in this physical body, we will suffer. We have been through illnesses, moments of our lives that we are sick. Just getting a cold, right? Catching a cold nowadays, it's not easy. A stomach flu. So guess what? The physical body already is a trial for all of us. And if we think that we're not going to go through any pain, now, we will see a little bit later that how we can react to this. We also have the medical advancements. We also have the changes, everything that medicine brings to us, and we don't really pay attention to it, or we don't even take it positively. Because if we compare ourselves 2019 to 30 years ago, how many illnesses we have already been able to cure, or to have treatments to help the cure to it, right? Talking about mental illnesses, right, as we mentioned here. Mental illnesses. 50 years ago, somebody who had a quote-unquote mental condition in the sense that they had this or that, they were left aside. They were put into special places and forgotten. And they had no place whatsoever in society. Nowadays, they at least have some respect. In most countries, in most societies of planet Earth, we can see that already developing, getting better and better, where they are respected. They are respected. And technology. What technology have done for us? How easy is our lives with technology nowadays, right? With all of this that we have, with all of this, we still see pathologies, we still see a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. She says something really interesting that I would like to point out this to the teenager, for the younger ones, the parents as well, watching us and will be watching us in the future as well. Insecure youth have become despair's biggest victims and are one step away from depression, madness, and suicide. With all that we mentioned here, with all the advancements in the medical arena, in the psychological arena as well, we still see this with technology. We're going through into this madness. Again, Alba, insecure youth have become despair's victims or victims of despair and are one step away from depression, madness, and suicide. How many times, I know, well, we can debate here. Well, Leo, it's easy for us to put something online and everybody will see. So we can take in relevance the fact that now we have media, very fast media, that we see more illnesses, we see more difficulties than we used to see, right? In the past, when we didn't have the cell phone or the internet, we would have to wait for something to come on the radio or TV, but nowadays it's fast. So we think that we're being bombarded by too much, and it is. And in fact, it is happening more and more that sometimes it's like, well, where is the technology? Where is the advancements that we have received? She's pointing this out because it's the suffering from the suffering. We have our sufferings, and we create more sufferings on top of these things, on the difficulties that we already have. And then she says, illness, however, is the result of an imbalance in the energies of the body due to the emotional fragility of the spirit acting upon it. Viruses, bacteria, and other destructive microorganisms are not actually responsible for illness. Instead, the cells nourish them as they begin inhabiting the areas where the energy has waned. They cause physical and mental weakness, which fosters the emergence of illness due to the depletion of health-sustaining energy. Drugs may kill these invaders, but they do not restore the desired balance if the preserving source does not emit the force that sustains the body. So what we like to call, it's the cold that I got, right? It's everybody else's fault, but not mine. Well, guess what? You had an open door for it. And I'm not saying this in a bad way. I have a runny nose, by the way, sorry. So that is one of the bacteria, perhaps, but if I was able to maintain a very straight mind, a straight heart, perhaps that cold wouldn't have an open door to install itself. Leo, is that true? Well, I'm not saying it's Joanna de Angelis. It's Joanna de Angelis. So don't shoot the messenger. And she goes on to say that when people's mental and moral conduct cultivates irritability, hatred, jealousy, rancor, or wastefulness, it impregnates the nervous system with deleterious vibrations that block the areas through which healthy energy travels, making way for the onset of illnesses due to the proliferation of the degenerative viral agents settling there. It's a lot, I know. So I'll leave it open for us to digest a little bit. One of the things that I want to go ahead and discuss with you further, besides the irritability, the hatred, the jealousy, the rancor, the wastefulness, is one of the things that recently I've been trying to watch more and more. Sometimes we can say, okay, irritability, I'm here. Hatred, here. Jealousy, in the middle. Rancor, You start working with yourself. Wastefulness. What is she talking about, the wastefulness? And this is going back to one of the messages that is on the book, Happy Life. You have sometimes that 2 hours in the morning, right? That instead of settling down after wake up, right, and do the things that you have to do, you put on the news. And what do? You watch negative news, right? Wastefulness of time. No, seriously, it is. Then you're at work and you go to break. Instead of going to break and reading something nice or having a nice lunch, you keep thinking about your boss who said something that you didn't like. Wastefulness of time. Wastefulness of your energy. And then you go home and then you think, why my stomach is not settled? Why I feel this? Well, guess what? You open the door. This is so true in our lives that we don't even pay attention. Sit down and talk with somebody. Analyze the type of conversation that you will have. And once you start doing this more and more, you'll be like, okay, wastefulness of the energy. I'm speaking things that perhaps I shouldn't have said to Chris. Chris said something back to me that I didn't like. Perhaps we got into this conversation talking about this or that person or that situation. We wasted time, wasted energy, and we don't know why we feel sick. We don't know why we create more sickness or more suffering on top of our suffering. I'll take Paula's example. What if she comes to me and said, Leo, I'm suffering because, the pain that I was feeling, that I'm feeling, whatever illnesses that she's going through. And then instead of helping her, I just say, tough luck, or I start talking to her about my pain that I feel that was greater than hers. Waste of time. Instead of, saying, Paula, hang in there. You'll feel better. No help whatsoever. Thank you. And we waste time. Right? To continue, it's important for us to really, I can't see. It's really important for us to analyze these moments and and really bring to heart the reasons why we are not feeling well. Conditionings, pessimistic ideas, preposterous beliefs, and aggravations are responsible for the tensions leading to disharmony. How many times we go through these moments as well that we have the pessimistic ideas of, we give the example as well of talking about somebody else's illness and whatnot. Bless you. When individuals avoid such burdens, their energetic immunological systems will free them from their illness and their lives will change, thus improving their health. How many times we have heard this? I was talking to Paula earlier today as well. It's like, wait a minute. It's so second nature, right? It's so mundane, but we don't pay attention. Because again, we're wasting time with negative things. We're wasting time with just this moment, thinking that we are this lifetime. Leo is this, is what you see here. But we have to remember that we are beyond of what we see ourselves today. We have a baggage, we have things that we have to work through. The once, right? Joanna de Angelis mentions earlier today too, when Vanessa read, that we have to get rid of the things that perhaps are not important for us anymore. To finalize, the root causes of, at least of this part, the root causes of illnesses, therefore, lie within individuals themselves, who must engage in self-examination in order to be released from this kind of suffering. This kind of suffering. There are types of suffering, right? This kind of suffering. It's within us. It's not Aloysio who will go ahead and take care of me. He can help. But if I don't change, guess what? If I don't allow myself to change, if I don't, in a good way, oblige myself to change, it's not going to happen. And don't think it's going to happen tomorrow just because we're having this talk, this conversation. It's a lot of effort. We'll see this later on. Suffering from impermanence, the second one. What do you think the word impermanence means?
Nothing's permanent.
Nothing is permanent. Even though we're not going to talk about the second meaning of this word, which is good, okay, this is another Buddhist view of life as well. There are two meanings that we have, two ways that we can analyze this idea that nothing is permanent, okay? Number one is the one that we'll talk about it, is that everything is temporary. And we utilize our energies to things that are temporarily. And we pay an immense amount of money, time, energy to get these things that are temporary. And less is only a few hours, sometimes a few minutes, right? On the other side, it's also important to look at this idea of being not forever or a short period of time through our sufferings as well. We're not going to dive into that area. But everything shall pass. So remember impermanence when you're making a decision on something that you will get or will do, as well as remember impermanence when you're suffering. But here's what she's trying to get us to remember. There is also pleasure that begets suffering. And I don't want to miss anything. Everyday life shows that the insatiable pursuit of pleasure is a torment that afflicts without reward. When one does get the opportunity to enjoy it, it is obvious that that price was too high and the resultant sensation was not worth it. How many times we have been through situations where we got into something that later on it's like, okay, the benefits is not as correspondent to the price that I pay for it. It's not. That vacation that I took, and I spent thousands of dollars for that vacation, and I'm still paying, now I have to get another vacation to compensate the number of hours that I'm working to pay for that vacation. And it was temporary. Yeah, beautiful. We posted online, all the beautiful moment and everything, but it was temporary. It's not worth it. I'm not saying that what we got out of it, which is not what she's saying, that we got out of it wasn't worth it, wasn't pleasurable, right? But guess what? You paid a high price for it. We pay a high price for the things that sometimes is mundane, is materialistic. A new car, a bigger home than we need, the things that we think that is necessary for us, and then later on we go back and say, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have bought that, right? We have to put on the balance, on the scale. Is it really worth it? That's what she's talking about when we go into the unnecessary parts of life. This is not to say that when you are really trying to making a decision that you're going to be fearful, right? That sometimes we have to do things in our lives. We have to take risks, but you have to analyze it if this is going to be worth it enough for you. To actually enjoy a certain pleasure, individuals invest it beyond their possibilities, only to realize afterwards how hard it is to hold on to it, to the object of their desire. The struggle to own the latest model of car exposes them to heavy debt in the future. Their imagination stimulates them with the illusion of ownership, but once the pleasure fades away, they find that they cannot afford to maintain the vehicle. Residence or pieces of furniture, that is, everything that is impermanent and shines just for one day. We're not criticizing the decisions that we make in life and the things that we want to buy. Because again, we should strive to have a decent home, have a decent car, have a decent life, dress well, but within our means, within the ways that we can do so. And this is not easy because we're in the flesh, right? It shines. It's really interesting that when I was reading the book, Paul and Stephen, it's not something that really pierces our hearts only nowadays that we see the beautiful homes, beautiful cars. Saul went through the same thing. He was going through this regenerative moment where he had his love, and his love was calling him to change, right? To go through, to analyze himself and change. And this is again Saul, not Paul yet. And I remember a passage from the book when Emmanuel brings the teachings that when he was going through those moments of thinking and analyzing about his life, he again would think about the grandeur that he had, of the power that he had, and that would shut that idea off, right? A beautiful horse, a beautiful status in society, and all these things would have shut him off. This idea of rescuing what's necessary for us inside of us. So I was like, So he went through that as well. And many of us, we'd go through that as well. It may not be the car, it may not be a material item, but it could be other things that stops us from growing as well. And as I mentioned, there is no need to have fear, but to have balance, right? To go the middle way instead of going too much or nothing at all. This is also when the example that I was bringing for Saul is something that interesting that Joanna de Angelis brings to us, is that she says, the mistake of individuals considering themselves invincible and superior, demonstrating an awareness about the weakness and the impermanence of everything that comprises them, even the physical body. So it's important for us to look at, open up this idea of living the physical body or being materialistic, not only with the buying, what we can get, but ourselves as well. This is the consoling part, once one measures the real possibilities without having to sacrifice, it becomes feasible to determine how far one can venture without risking subsequent grief and regret. So measure. Would this be worth? Talk to a couple people that knows a little bit about what you're trying to do in your life, that been through, read. We have the internet nowadays. Google a little bit, and then make a decision on what you want to do. This correct, realistic vision of life frames it with harmony. On the other hand, unwarranted fantasy accounts for the inevitable clash with reality. To finalize, the way to spare oneself from suffering is by confronting vicissitudes and overcoming the appeals indicative of wealth and unwarranted pleasures. And of course, there are a significant number of pleasures that do not entail the risk of turning into a cause for suffering. Better choices, better ways. I would ask you now, give me an example of pleasures that do not entail the risk of turning into a cause for suffering. Because this is inside of us. We have to exemplify. Alba.
Enjoying family time.
Enjoying family time. Awesome. Does it cost anything? It does. But it's not paying $10,000 for a vacation.
Unless you become a fanatic, exercising.
Exercising, yes. Moderation, yes.
The act of giving to others it brings a lot of, I guess you could say, pleasure and joy.
Thank you. Later on, we'll talk about altruism. Yes. Giving back to others, exercising. All of these things. It is true, right? And does it cost? Yes, there is a cost for everything. We are living on earth, physical body. We got to pay our bills, do the things, but go within your means. Do not create the suffering from impermanence on things. Do not waste time on things that it's going to be temporary. Look for this small moment of life that is going to take you somewhere. The family time that you sit down and you have a serious conversation, but productive, right? That you're not wasting energy. Quite the opposite. You actually making your life better and the life of the loved one better as well. Paula.
Just, I guess I need the microphone. I just wanted to echo your example of turning on the television in the morning, because Dr. Daniel Amen, in his latest book, there's a quiz you take for health risk factors, and he states watching more than 2 hours of television a day is a health risk factor.
Wow. I am trying to stay away from 2 minutes of TV. Imagine 2 hours, but thank you. Thanks for sharing that. It's definitely true. So these are two. We have one more, and we have to keep going because we have another chapter to go through. Suffering, therefore, when one is aware of it, is easily avoidable when we do these analyses. Not for us to suffer with the analysis, but really to stop and think before you act. Suffering resulting from conditionings. This, by far, is one of the most important topics of this chapter. What does she mean? What does she mean about conditionings? What is it? Put a conditioning, right? Put a condition. Let's see. The suffering resulting from conditioning tells a flawed education and unhealthy social interaction, which produce contaminated physical and mental aggregates. Remember when we talk about thought in life, how we are responsible for our thoughts or what we emanate to others? And we're also responsible for how others we will feel, how others will receive what we're emanating. And we have to be careful on how we receive the emanations of others. We can't stop it, but we have to make sure that we are responsible on how we receive it. Marcelo can go ahead and send all kinds of ideas towards me, but I have a choice on how I'm going to receive it, right? I can send several ideas to Dione right now, but it's up to her. She may be able to attune, much like we attune with, the radio station on the radio, but she can say, no, it's not time for me to attune to those thoughts right now. And here, Joanna de Angelis is coming back and saying the type of educations that we receive. For many individuals, their range of values is upside down. At its base are the immediate, the risky, the vulgar, and the promiscuous, in addition to temporary power and might. These are seen as what really matter in life. Consequently, their aggregates under heavy loads of contamination produce long-lasting physical and mental suffering. I can't remember the speaker the other day. It's in Portuguese, and I shared on my Facebook page about the psychosomatic situation of planet Earth nowadays. Hosandro Kingsley, right? He was talking, it's very interesting. You know, if we wanted to understand what planet Earth is going through right now, all we need to do, or to see our level of advancement, all we need to do is turn on the radio, turn on the TV, read the postings in your Facebook page, read what's on the news, right, in general. Or pay attention to, I would say, 5 conversations that you come across. You don't have to be part of it. In your break room or when you go to work or whatever, right? Pay attention to the conversation. And you will see the level of conversations, of interactions. What are they saying? That will dictate where we are as a nation in the planet Earth. And how we're relating to one another. And what kind of friendships that we have, right? It's alarming. The kids in the back and those who will be watching us as well, make good choices. We're not going to say that we're going to leave aside the people that are not, quote unquote, what we consider good, right? Because we need to help them as well. If they're reincarnated with us on Earth, we need to educate. How? When something negative comes up, we say, no, this is not for me. Have you ever had a friend that tells you that, oh, so-and-so came to me and said something that I didn't like? Well, what did you say? What was your reply? You have a choice to say, please don't tell me these things anymore. But it's funny that that same person keeps bringing you to you over and over and over. Oh, this so-and-so happened this with this person. That you don't need to know. You have a choice. We have a choice with what we hear, obviously, with what we say as well. So these conversations, these interactions is very important for us. And as she says, the values are upside down. I'm sorry to say, but it's upside down. You know, it's funny nowadays we do evaluations on our generations compared to previous generation, and they say that we're lost. And then we look at the next generations, and we look at it and say, oh my gosh, where are we going with this, right? I wouldn't say it's not all true, but there are a lot of things that we need to fix. We have this idea, and we're going to talk a little bit more here, that we are entitled to everything. And in fact, we have to work hard, right? And we have this idea that we can do whatever we want. The morbid emissions of negative energy sent from one person to another ends up contaminating the latter if he or she does not have defensive. Reactive means stemming from upright mental and moral conduct. As we have mentioned already, it's important that we develop this ability to take care of ourselves. I can't stop anybody from coming to me and tell me something that I perhaps don't like. But then it's up to me to stop it right there, try to re-educate that individual if that person is open or not. If not, let's say, look, I can't take this anymore. Oh, but Leo, you're being too harsh. Well, are you going to let that continue? Remember, Joanna de Angelis also tells us that we are citizens of the universe, and the planet Earth is our home. If we don't stop and make a decision to say, I want this to change, by those little interactions, it's not going to happen. And then we'll have to reincarnate to clean a mess that we could have stopped from the beginning. Non-threatening, ethically and morally grounded education, the kind that stimulates individuals' awareness of duty and responsibility to themselves, their neighbor, and life, equips them with emotional health and spiritual courage for a balanced journey. Through the physical existence, this knowledge prepares them to choose what is useful and wholesome, helping them grow inwardly toward self-realization. Until this insight converts into a channeling force for their well-being, individuals will experience suffering resulting from conditioning stemming from their contaminated physical and mental aggregates. We're talking about the physical world, mostly, right? Because this is what we can see, this is what we can grasp. But we are in a Spiritist center. One aspect of this that I want to bring, and it's important for us to discuss, is what? We're spirits. The aggregates that she talks about here, it's not only Chris and I and all of us here. Each one of us, we have our friends that travels with us Oh, this is kind of scary. No, it's not. It's life. Law of attraction, right? We think alike, guess what? We're going to attract, good minds or bad minds as well that will be following us. So it's important for us to take this aspect and multiply the aggregates that we think it's only a small group by the thousands. So imagine if I make a decision in my life to change. Guess what? Those who are following me and seeing this change, they may not change overnight, but they will change as well. And it's the catalytic effect, right? One person made a decision, guess what? The other one would do too. That person perhaps who would bring me a bad idea or engage in a mundane conversation, that person will stop because that person will not see in me the ground to do so. So suffering resulting from conditioning. Education, our values need to be analyzed as well as our interactions with one another. Let's think about ourselves first, because it's easy for us to say, oh, the world is corrupted. But how corrupted am I? What kind of conversations am I engaging? What ideas am I bringing to the people that are next to me? Is it positive or not? This concludes this part, but it's important for us to take this chapter and analyze that it's not just these three types of suffering that she's talking about. One of the most important things as well is that as she is talking throughout this chapter is to point out to us that we are responsible for our suffering. And since we are responsible, we're also entitled to change. Because suffering is not forever. There is an impermanence aspect of suffering, but it depends on us. It depends on us. Moving on to chapter 3, the origins of suffering. The question again was asked, right? What are the origins of our suffering? There are two books that I would like to bring to mind here if you want to study a little bit more about this, right? The idea number 1 of suffering, chapter number 5 of the Gospel According to Spiritism, here. Chapter number 5, yes, from item to 6 to 10. And Kardec brings explanations about sufferings that are generated in this lifetime, sufferings from the past as well, okay? And the reason why we go through in the types of suffering, we'll talk a little bit more and I will kind of connect more, but I don't want to forget that you have these resources for you as well. The second book that I want to talk about it, that we will talk a little bit about the planning of our incarnation, is the book Missionaries of Light, chapter 12. It goes through, André Luiz explains very well what goes on into the planning of a lifetime, a physical lifetime, okay? So just keep that in mind. Chapter 12 of Missionaries of Light, as well as the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 5, from item 6 to 10. The origins of suffering, where are they from? Where are they coming from? We see suffering everywhere, as we mentioned, right? We turn on the news and we see all the crazy things going on out there. Joanna de Angelis says the following. According to Buddhism, again, the origins of suffering derive from internal and external conditions from which two other orders result, karma and perturbing emotions. Now, I want to stop here. In Spiritism, we don't dive into the idea of karma as we understand in Buddhism, but the effects of a cause, right? The consequences of a cause. Another beautiful book that André Luiz brings to explain this is Action and Reaction. There is a reaction for every action, right? Kirsten and I, we did an amazing talk series on this as well, that we discussed the chapters. We encourage you to watch to read the book besides watching the YouTube videos as well. Of course, as the Spiritist doctrine emphasizes, humans are the sum of their own experiences, the architects of their own destinies, which they shaped by means of the impositions of determinism and free will. This is quite interesting because when we come across these two words, impositions of determinism and free will. So is she contradicting herself on the idea of impositions of determinism, that something is determined to happen in your life? Do we suffer, and is it determined that we have to suffer? Think about these things. Ask yourself. Or do we really have free will to choose, to change the suffering that we're going through? Look what she says. This determinism only unavoidable in some respects. Birth, death, reincarnation establishes the matrices of bodily existence, propelling individuals towards their ultimate destiny, relative perfection. The factors that program the conditions for rebirth in the physical body are the result of the acts and thoughts of previous lifetimes. Being happy as soon as possible or stay unhappy for a long time depends on one's personal free will. The choice of how and when to act either frees the spirit from suffering or grips it in its pincers. It's the past. It's right back there. Or when I say the past, it's not like the lifetime. It can be 10 years ago that somebody did something to me and I'm suffering over it still. Or let's say I kind of put that aside, but then something comes up and triggers it, right? And we start suffering again, and we go through this. There's these two ways, the karmic and the perturbing emotions as well, right? It could be both. It could be both. Sometimes things happen in our lives that perhaps will trigger things of past lives that we still have to revisit, and we'll see why. This is a concept that I never paid attention to, and we'll see why. So this is the idea that she's bringing to us. There are two ways here, guys. There are two ways for us to go ahead and make our lives better. It's the responsibility that we have towards what we have done in the past, as well as it's the one of the things that she brings as well, that she talks about the negative part of it. But what about the positive side of our lives? The things that we have done well. Have we ever noticed this in our lives? Think of the aptitudes that you have, the things that you can do well. And don't tell me that you don't have one. Oh, no, so-and-so is much better than I am. We love to hear this. You know, the false ideals that everybody else is better than I am because we don't want to take responsibility. Seriously, stop and think of the good things that you have inside of you, what you can do well. Or, okay, you had to learn. Play an instrument, for example, but you learn so quickly, much faster than everybody else in your class. Why? We don't pay attention to these things. At work, when you're doing a task, that you look at the task and say, okay, all right, everybody else is struggling. When we see speakers, that they speak very well. They don't put much effort into the skill of developing the skill of speaking naturally to people. Why? The interesting thing is that they're utilizing the good deeds or the attributes that they have for something good, right? They're reaping the attributes that they have. They're utilizing the attributes well to reap good consequences as well. And we don't pay attention to this. She doesn't go in depth in this area, but I think it's important for us to really analyze, because most of the time when we're talking about suffering, we focus on what? On the negative. And it's okay. But then we have to emphasize the positive as well. Consequently, human suffering of a karmic nature may manifest in mutually complementing forms: trial and expiation. Both aim to educate or re-educate individuals, predisposing them to inevitable inner growth on their journey towards the plenitude awaiting them. We often like to say that our corrective system in the world is still developing, to lack of better words. Because look what she says here. Both aim, and this is again, trial and expiation, both aim to educate or re-educate individual, not to punish, not to make someone suffer, There's a suffering behind, and we will see, because we go through this every day. But that's not the intent. That's not God's intent to, I'm going to make Leo suffer for being a tall person. Everybody like, Leo, talking to being a tall person. I wish you had my height. The tall individuals when you have to sit on a small chair, it's not easy. Much like a short individual, when you have to, get up there. Yeah, we can grab it, right? We use it well. But perhaps you don't have the back issues that a tall person may develop as well, right? Because the center of gravity is kind of displaced. In any case, this is just an example, guys. It's a funny, but an example that we can take in consideration on the difficulties that we have, as well as on the attributes that we have, right? So it's not meant for us to suffer. It's meant to educate ourselves. One of the things that she talks about in this area as well is that how much love we are given to go through these trials and expiatory moments of our life. So keep that in mind as well, that sometimes we're going through difficult moments of our lives, whether a trial or expiation, and we forget our partners, we forget our friends, we forget the Spirit center, right? We go there, we partake in these good moments, we are engaged with the support that we have in society, but we take it for granted. Pay attention more to the positive things of life, and we'll see that these trials or the suffering that comes with it will be diminished. Think more of the positive. Again, something that Paul and I were talking about earlier. Connect with the positive a little bit more. But let's go back to trials. What are trials? There's a difference. Trials are not the same thing of expiation. Another really interesting part of the Gospel according to Spiritism that explains that planet Earth is still a planet under the classifications of this that the Spirit gives to us of trial and expiation. So much like we suffer in this physical body, guess what? We will go through trials and expiation on Earth until we change our vibratory field and we enter a new era that is of what? Regeneration. That doesn't mean we're not going to see difficult things, but we will be in that regenerative moment that we said, gosh, I suffered. That was tough. And we still have to be careful, because if we continue or we kind of relapse, we can say that way, we may go through the sufferings again. Joanna de Angelis says, a trial is an experience required or proposed by the candidate's spirit guide prior to bodily rebirth. Once the evolutionary records, the odds of victory, and the resources within reach have been evaluated. Trials manifest as tendencies, aptitudes, limitations, and possibilities under the candidate's control, as well as bearable pains and moderate joys, offering the widest range of educational outcomes. Nothing is imposed. We'll say it again. Nothing is imposed. The calendar of events may be modified without any harm to the candidate's program of illumination. Going back to Missionaries of Light. Chapter 12. Segismundo is reincarnating. Guess what? There is a program. On paper, let's go ahead and analyze what this person will go through, this individual, and Angela Louise give other cases as well. That most of the time, this is under the guidance of a mentor, of a guardian angel, assisting that spirit to reincarnate without imposition, without limits. What am I trying to say? What we go through in our lives right now, it's bearable. Because if it wasn't, God wouldn't allow us to go through. Really, Leo? But I suffer so much. Yeah, well, guess what? We can bear it. Because think about this law. It needs to be just as well. That's why in this Spirit's book, we see towards the end of the book, the law of justice and love. It has to have a balance. And if we believe in a God that created us to be happy, it would be unjust for us to think that what we're bearing right now it's unbearable. The sufferings that we have is unbearable. What kind of God would that be? Right? The imposing Father. No. Well, Jesus already came and changed that. It's the Father. Whereas before Christ, we had this idea of God being this imposing, right, very hateful God that demand things on us. The laws are there. The way we work with them is something different. Trials does manifest rather gently, mitigating in their contents and blessed in their purposes. Instead of being punitive, they educate by raising individual awareness, encouraging the use of the occasion in the most efficient and profitable way, so as to equip them to become living examples worthy of being imitated by others, apostles of love and suffering, missionaries of the good, martyrs for their ideals, even in the anonymity of their testimony. I want to take these two and connect. On the first paragraph there, you see the possibilities. What are the possibilities that we have? I'll give you a very simple example. An argument at home with your partner or somebody that you like. Doesn't have to be a partner. Don't think that that's a quote unquote a challenge only. It is a challenge, but it's a possibility. Because if you have that argument or you have that, let's say, discord with that individual, we have also the possibility to make it right, to state your cause, your idea with respect, allow the other individual also to say, and settle things based on respect, right? And sometimes we think that it's just a trial. It's not a possibility. So that is a possibility, and most of the time, these moments are left unnoticed. So why don't we go back now and say, what about the moments that we did right? What about the situations that was, even though it was a struggle, we made it right, or I made it right? It's not for us to tap ourselves in the back or say, I'm this person, that person, but to really emphasize on the goodness, guys, to really look on the positive. It's important for us. And she's saying right here, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not missing the ideas that we would like to bring because it's quite a bit, and that's why we say that it's important for us to go through and really analyze within ourselves. Trials can change course and become gentler or harsher according to how a spirit handles them. So we have a preparation in the physical, in the spiritual world. Before we incarnate, we go through and say, okay, I'm going to do A, B, C. When they happen, I have a choice to rebel because we have free will and we suffer more. Thus, we go back to the suffering on suffering that we discussed earlier. Or we look at it and say, okay, this shall pass. Right? So you make that suffering, that difficult that you're going through, that you have to go through as a trial, temporarily. You know it's going to pass. You have to really have a strong mind into the future. And this is something that by far Spiritism can bring to us very easily if we are open to understand the next life. Right? The ability to accept and really live by it, eternity. We are eternal beings. So I'm not going to be Leo for the rest of my life. Hopefully 40 more years. But then after that, I'm going to be Leo plus everything else, and plus everything else that I'm going to live in the future. Have this futuristic mind, and we'll be able to diminish our sufferings. All learning requires effort in order to be assimilated, and every step of upward requires persistence, strength, and moral courage. Trials. To fix something that we have done in preparation, obviously under the preparation and guidance of our mentors. What about expiation? And it's already given it to us. I didn't really put, we can go through it because we're also running a little bit out of time. Expiation, on the other hand, are different. They are irrecusably imposed as powerful medicine, as corrective surgery for a wrong that has worsened. She takes the criminal process on earth, and I'm going to read it so we can discuss after read it. Similar to what happens in criminal process, first-time offenders usually receive greater clemency, resulting in a lighter sentence, and even if their crime was very serious, they are given a certain freedom of movement without being completely restricted. Depending on the offense, repeat offenders may be fined and placed under house arrest. However, those who do not change their ways are put into prison. Or, if the law is barbaric, may even be submitted to death penalty. Joanna de Angelis is saying, and it's true. It's true. For comparison purposes, first-time spirit offenders are submitted to trials, not expiations, whereas repeated offenders are subject to exacting expiation. Because God's love, prevails in all his laws much more just than human laws, wherever the crime, they are meant to re-educate and win offenders over, rather than eliminate them permanently. They are never meant as revenge, but as a means of rehabilitation, for all are capable of being rehabilitated. There is a huge difference. There is a huge gap on the idea of imprisoning someone or demanding an education or re-education, comparing the two. And this is something that we still need to work within ourselves. It's beautiful to take this and compare, right, with the criminal process. But how are we talking to ourselves when we do something wrong? Think about it. Put yourself in that beautiful chair that you're being analyzed, right? By the judge, by the group of people that is analyzing the case, and you are the representative of all these individuals. How do you do it? Do you impose something harsh on yourself for fears of others are doing or will be saying? They don't even know what you have done, but your conscience does, right? And we start telling ourselves, oh my gosh, I need to punish myself. I need to do this. I need to do that. I'm comparing ourselves, our minds, to what she brings up here now. It's beyond of just reading words and not really working within ourselves. All individuals have to live with their own conscience in accordance with the divine codes deeply imprinted there. Individuals collect the resonances of their respective transgression as remedial or those conducive to liberation. It's up here. The moral laws that we study on Thursdays, right? With the Spirit's book. It's all inside of us. How we process these laws, on how we work with these laws, it depends on us, on our level of advancement. And it's up to us, if we have a little bit of understanding of these laws, on how we need to treat ourselves to help others. That's why I said on the message last night, don't beat yourself up. When we start analyzing ourselves, we tend to go one way or the other. And we know that Buddha, did what? Stay in the middle. Let us not be so crazy about these ideas. This is important. Expiations may be mitigated, but not canceled. Action and reaction again. While trials consist of a form of reparative suffering that leads to advancement, expiations only restore lost equilibrium, leading wrongdoers back to the situation they were in before their tragic failure. So, that's the difference. The expiation is the following. It's like you paying your debt with that situation, with that individual, with that group of people. But guess what? You got to go back and take the test again. We got to go back and take the test again. And that's why the altruistic ideas that Kirsten brought earlier today, that's why engaging in society, having good conversations, doing good deeds, small things counts. Because it is those moments that we have control of that will change on how we live our lives. That doesn't mean, again, that if we did something wrong, that we're not going to have to do it. But we're going to be more permeable. and more susceptible to take care of the things that we have to do. The conscience is unforgiving when it comes to forgetting a crime. Forgiveness is only possible by means of the offender's rehabilitation. The rehabilitation only happens if we do good deeds, if we apply ourselves well, if we impose good things on ourselves. When I say impose, it's not in a negative way, but it's in a positive and subtle way to say, I'm going to try this differently. I'm not going to be so negative about the universe. Therefore, the origins of suffering always lie in those who bear it in the innermost part of their being, in the deep folds of our conscience. It's right here, and it's right here. Whatever we do, how we think, and so on. For us to finalize, along the karmic origins of suffering, there are current causes, courting suffering through irresponsibility, hastiness, and the prevalence of selfishness, which encourages individuals to make the best choice for themselves at the expense of their neighbor. This attitude manifests as perturbing emotions, which deadens the individual's aspiration and coalesce into different modalities of affliction. What are these modalities of affliction, guys, that Joanna de Angelis talks about it? Right here. And we said at the beginning, really interesting, he talks about the wants, right? The desires that we have. We have to make sure that we tame ourselves. Why do I want this? How do I want this? What are the purpose? What are the causes that the effects that this will bring to me? The illusion that comes with the desire, the illusion of having things, right? The illusion is like, I want this. You aspire for something that you think it's big. And then the delusion comes afterwards where you see that it's not what it was. And you're upset, right? The hatred that we have is still inside of us. And Joanna de Angelis talked about this a little bit further about the wars that we have. It's very beautiful to analyze the wars outside, right, in other countries, the wars that we have within our country. But what about the world that is in this country? That is in this country. This is a universe. When somebody says something that you don't like and you engage, perhaps you don't say it back, but you're thinking. You're thinking, right? Somebody cuts you off and then, oh gosh, there starts that battle on 95 or 83, whatever you are. Every day. Every day. Thank you. So I'm not the only one then. So these are the battles that we have to talk about, that they come from what? Hatred. That little hatred that we think that when we're doing the evaluation, that is a little tiny bit, but it's there. So how can we condemn the huge wars that is out there? And then something very interesting as well, frustration. Frustration from what? Expecting something that is not there yet. Expecting from ourselves, guess what? We're going to be frustrated. We can say that we will do. I can say that I'm going to go get up early tomorrow and go to the gym, but if I don't do it, and then I become frustrated, guess what? I put too much expectation on something that I'm not yet in control of. I need to develop little by little, that I will get up early, I will do this, I will do that, or study, or take any new endeavor. But sometimes we're frustrated with things that we just thought that we could do it. And then extrapolate it a little bit more with other individuals as well. This I would like to ask somebody to read. Perhaps if we can pass the microphone to finalize this part, because if I read, I'll read, yes, but then I like to get everybody engaged. And this is the moment of consolation. So, Vanessa, please. And you can pass to your mother, to back, or whoever. Everybody speaks English and can read. So let's start over here.
Just the first, yeah.
Yes.
Love is the antidote to all causes of suffering because it proceeds from divine consciousness, which generates and sustains life in all its expressions.
Enlivened by love, humans discern, aspire, act, and surrender themselves with confidence, radiating life-giving energy Chat constantly.
That constantly, sorry.
Oh, that constantly renews them and changes the landscape around them for the better.
Love is always the wise counselor in all circumstances, efficiently guiding the individual and producing salutary results that drive progress and happiness.
At the root of any kind of suffering, the author is always the spirit itself, which, in the process of its evolution, has chosen poorly, training the dynamics of love for the choice of suffering.
In order to speed recovery, the order of events is thus reversed, and suffering becomes the means of leading the spirit back to love, on whose pathways plenitude is found.
It's deep, right? But Joanna de Angelis is telling us, reassuring us again, that we have what it takes. That we may be going through our trials, that we may be going through our expiations. We all are. Otherwise, we wouldn't be incarnated in this planet that is a planet of trials and expiations. Sorry to break out to you. This is what we're living right now. If you want to change it, be my guest. But it's not. We're not going to find anything else but this. The discover of ourselves to be better. The discover that there is love. Look at this. We're in a gathering right now that we're talking about problems, that we're talking about the emergency from our troubles. Is there any other better place to be right now? Because we have choices. Think about this. We made a choice today to be here. There are other people, they haven't made this choice yet. So we are a step ahead. That doesn't mean we are better. It means we have a greater responsibility with ourselves and with one another. And we have this love. We have the potential. This is what she's bringing to us. She's talking about suffering. She's talking about our difficulties. But she's elevating ourselves to a level. Remember, the exercise that I mentioned earlier. Imagine Joanna de Angelis next to us and says, come on, saying, come on. And Divaldo Franco tells a story really interesting, that Joanna de Angelis, when she appears to him and she's smiling and she kind of looks a little happier than usual, it's because he did something wrong. It's because she did something that is like, you could have done better. Let's put it this way, not saying something wrong, but you could have done something better. The way he talks about it, it's really interesting. But she is that personal trainer that's not going to be yelling at us, but she's going to come to us and smile and say, Leo, come on, let's do this better. Again, yeah, exactly. Again, Leo. Imagine, and it's interesting because perhaps that we may want to imitate that as well. When something goes wrong and say, okay, right? Let's try this again. Smile. Be kind. I know I'm far away from that, but we'll get there one day. But this is the idea, folks. Trial, expiations. Let us make sure that we are living in the middle, not the extremes. Let us take these Buddhist ideals that she's bringing to us and learn. And hopefully, as I learn more about the insights of Buddhism, I can, give you more ideas, talk a little bit more. But what we need to focus really is what she's bringing to us, which is this transformation in our lives, from suffering to plenitude. So I want to just commit again with each one of you, and hopefully that you can read these chapters well the next time that we come together, which is going to be towards the end of month of March. Chapter 4, the end of suffering. Number 5, approaches to end suffering as well. We're going to cover 2 more chapters, and from there on, from April on, we're going to only cover 1 chapter to make it easier, because it's a lot of information. We went a little bit over time, and we can digest a little bit better, okay? My thanks to Joanna de Angelis to bring this inspiration to all of us. My thanks to all of you as well to paying attention, and hopefully you can take this and exercise it and read it. Okay? Read it. More homework for all of you next week. and then the week prior to our next session. I'll give 5 minutes for us to make comments or any questions that you perhaps may have, please. I'll go to Paula first, and then we can.
Thank you. That was excellent. I was really struck with her conciseness when she explained how we get sick and how we get better. And what I was thinking of is that currently Western medicine doesn't really embody that understanding. You're going to find it better with holistic medicine and all the practitioners that work with you through massage, etc., chiropractic. And then also the psychologists are getting it through positive psychology. But it's an important understanding that you will repeat your patterns and reattract something else later.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Paula, it's a difficult subject, and I agree with you. I am in agreement with you. What I find more and more, and this is perhaps not an answer, is my take on it, is that I think it really depends on how we're receiving the treatment. Because I can come over here and receive the passes. That doesn't mean I'm going to cross the door, I'm going to be fine, right? Or if I feel fine, if I have the transformation, that what's going to stop me from going back to the same thoughts, feelings, and actions that will bring back not the same illness, perhaps something more acute, something worse. The same thing when we take a painkiller. It's okay to take painkiller. It's unbearable. You take something, or you feel that you need to take something, or you go to the doctor, you get something prescribed. How are you taking that medicine? I remember Vanessa and Saloni talking about this. Pray before you take it. I tell my kids all the time, you have that cold, and Brazilians, we love black beans. We love the black beans and rice. Before you eat it, pray on it. Pray and really eat it with intention. Okay, Leo, but I don't have black beans. Whatever you're eating, make that moment. Take it really. I mean, that's what's going to help you. Why do we think that the chicken soup from our grandmothers worked? When she was making, guess what she was doing? Right? She was putting the love and all those. So it's important for us to, yes, I also agree that we still have a long way to go in medical care. But it's also, what are we doing? Right? How are we monitoring ourselves? So I think that we have to bring balance into that idea. Alba.
Thank you, Leo. It was wonderful. I kept thinking about the expiation. When Joanna expressed that in the expiation, it's like you're paying for your wrongs, let us say it that way, and then you will begin at the point you were before you commit the errors, etc., etc. However, I'm trying to think, because in the book Sublime Expiation by Divaldo Franco, the Sublime Expiation is about the leprosy, how the main character went through this expiation because of past errors, but however, by the end of that lifetime, he became a better person than he was before. You know what I mean?
I got you.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm just trying to think what is she expressing in the book.
It's a tricky question, and I get it, because we think that this idea that because we go through the expiation, that we become a better person, that everything is okay. So where is the justice in all this? Because the wrong was done. Yes, you became a better person because you expiated on that situation, but now where is the test where you're going to do the right thing? There is an action. You need to go back. Not necessarily with that individual that you had your problems directly with it, but other situations, other conditions. 2 examples. One is a mundane one, because I'm in the financial field. The other will be from the book, can't remember now. I believe it's Action and Reaction as well. And Kirsten can help me with this. But the first case is this. Let's take your credit score, right? You get to your credit score up to 700, right? And then at 700, something happens, you lose your job, you don't pay your bills. What happens? Your credit score is going to go down, right? Perhaps you did something like she said here, that you bought things that you didn't need, you sold them, now you learned the lesson. Beautiful. Does that mean your credit score will go back to 700, 800? No. You have to prove to your creditors now back that you are worth again to receive a loan. Let us take this in consideration now in the consensus of the loans that we get in our lives. Energy, time, people around us, and all those things. Everything is counting as these creditors that are coming back and saying, okay, now prove that you've learned the lesson. That's number one. I believe, again, is action and reaction. And I'm really trying to remember. I love when this happens. But there was a case of a woman with two, Missionaries of the Light, I think. A woman with two kids, right? And the individual who was the husband actually wanted to kill the mother, right? In the whole scenario. It doesn't happen. Thank God it doesn't happen, because the daughter wakes up right before through an induced, what we would say an induced dream, to scream, and right before the act he stops. But the intention was there, right? The mother, along with the kids, they were able to rescue what happened in the past. And then Andrea Luiz asked, okay, so what's going to happen with him? Well, he needs to still, they will ascend to higher grounds, but he's going to lag behind because he still have to fix what he did, right? Daniel is raising his hand.
Action reaction, the Chap is aggravate that.
Thank you. Check actually. Thank you, Daniel. And I remember, like I said, we did a study of the book, but I don't remember. Thank you, Daniel. Action and reaction. So what I'm trying to say here, one is the fixing part of it. The other is the not so great example that we look at it and he made it worse, right? If he were to say, I'm going to fix this, they would move on into, quote unquote, a better status, but he would still have to work with them and with himself to still show that he loved the daughter, he loved the son, he loved the wife, as he promised to do before he reincarnated. So the idea that we became better, that we learned from the lesson, is one thing. I can give you a book to read right now, but if you don't write that essay and you prove to me, as if I was a professor, that you truly understood and you bring that into your life, I have no way to say, or you don't have any way to prove that you in fact learned the lesson. That is my way to explain. I hope you understand. I hope we bring light to this idea as well. And this is not a punishment, but to really say, I learned the lesson. I want to prove it. I want to do everything right. And our intention is what's going to count, because it's justice and love. Remember the love. Don't stay on the justice, because then you're going to connect with our cruel system, right? It's love as well. So this is what I would like to leave you guys with. Go home. Well, before we go home, we have for a moment tonight. But when you go home, think about this. Think about subtly, not imposing. That's why we have these meetings, right? If you get too disturbed, stop. Go do something else. Go to the gym, like Paula said. Work it out, and then say, okay, now it's time to think about it. Ask your mentor to really help you with these things. So with no further ado, we will have our passes, and then we will have our gathering tonight. Thank you.